What's up, guys? This is Moneyball Cards. I am Jordan with the channel Sports Card Analytics, and I'm with Ryan from Breakout Cards. This is episode 6. And recently I've been reading this book called Fightnomics by Reed Kuhn. And there's a quote I wanted to read from it that's it kind of sums up what we're trying to do with this channel and this podcast and what we're going to be doing with this episode today. So it says the irony is that most will accept scientific research on things they know nothing about, but will reject it when it addresses something with which they are casually familiar. So this quote, the guy goes on to talk about basketball and hot streaks, and like if a shooter is known as like a 30% or like a 25% shooter, but he's on a hot streak. He just hit 10 in a row. We think that, let's let that guy shoot the final shot of the game, even though the best player in the team who shoots 50% historically has missed his last 10. We would want the guy who's on the hot streak to shoot it. But really analytically, we want the guy who historically shoots 50% to still take that shot. That's the better choice. That's what the analytics say. And people with cards where they know a lot about, we have a lot of things that we don't really look at analytically. People just tell us, and we believe it because we hear it so much in cards. And we have things like the hot shooter that we just believe because we see it. But the analytics say otherwise. So what we're trying to do with this channel is take things that we love, like sports, where there's just these common things that we hear, and we really want to dive into the numbers to see if that's true and apply that to sports cards. And speaking of sports cards, let's take a look at the cards that we've bought this past week. And Ryan, you can go ahead and show yours.
Yeah, so the first card I bought this week was actually a Pop 2 from 1922. I got this in Apopka, Florida at a card show. And it's a legendary player that for some reason people really forgot about. When you think of pre-war players, at least in the 1920s, everyone always goes and talks about Babe Ruth and a few other pitchers as well. But in 1922, there was a set called W575s. These cards look exactly like the American caramels. So when I saw this card at a show, I was kind of confused why it had a designation of a W575 rather than a caramel. And I'll kind of explain the story in a second. I'll talk about the player. It is a Tris Speaker, and it still has a price tag on it. So I'm going to show this right over here. Absolutely amazing card. These were hand cut, and Tris Speaker, really, really, really good player. I think he has like 135 WAR, 3,500 hits. I mean, today people are going crazy about Mike Trout thinking he's going to end over 100 WAR. Tris Speaker has 135 with 3,500 hits. Put that perspective, Pujols right now has under 100 WAR. And WAR, again, isn't a perfect stat. It doesn't take a look at absolutely everything. And you need to really dive into the intricacies of every single player. But at a broad level, just taking a look at players, WAR is a good way to compare players from different eras. Tris Speaker is a top 10 player of all time. Now, this card is a Pop 2, like I said. It is the highest graded. There's one authentic. This is 4 with a mark. But the mark on the back, interesting enough, is someone talking about what set it's in, W575. So this could have been something that was written at a card show in the 70s or 60s. So what people used to do is they used to either like stamp cards if they were a dealer to make sure all the cards were theirs, or put down different notes before all the catalogs and obviously before online where we can just look up things. And again, there's not many of these out there. The caramel actually has a caramel advertisement on the back. It's printed on. This has nothing. So that's why it's designated as a W575. This is staying in my PC forever.
That's really cool. That's really cool. My purchase is nothing like that at all. So I purchased 3 different cards, and I didn't get them this past week. These were actually purchases that I've made before, but they apply now. So when you play fantasy football and you're drafting and you're top running backs. You also like to handcuff your running backs, and people call them handcuffs. So a year ago, I thought about it when everyone was just getting into the hype of one player, and when a player's name would explode. I was thinking, well, what about the waiver wire? We do it every week in fantasy football. There's that top waiver wire pick. Well, what if that happens in cards? So I went ahead and bought 3 different of the top handcuffs from last year, and wanted to see what would happen a year later if I held on to them, or if someone got hurt. I would go ahead and sell it if their name became the top waiver wire pick, because everyone would hear their name and they would think about cards and go check out the card. So the first one is Alexander Madison. And for each of these cards, I made sure to get their jersey color match, because I was just looking for the coolest looking ones out there. And this is a gold one that matches with the Vikings gold and purple. And he's the backup to Dalvin Cook currently. And he hasn't quite had his chance to be that top waiver wire pick, even though Dalvin Cook does have a minor ankle sprain right now as we speak. But the next couple guys have shown up. This is Daryl Henderson. He was a backup to Todd Gurley. And this is a blue numbered out of 175. He's now the starting running back for the Rams. And I bought all of these cards for $5 or less a year ago. So I feel like I can definitely sell them for more than $5 now if I put them on eBay. And this next one, or last one, is a white select, try and get a good angle, white select Tony Pollard, numbered out of 35. He's the backup to Ezekiel Elliott. And if you haven't been paying attention to fantasy football lately, he's now starting to overtake Ezekiel Elliott for the starting spot on the Dallas Cowboys. And this was a $5 card a year ago. I don't know how much it would go for today, numbered out of 35. With the white, I think the white's really cool with the jersey match. And he is now he's the top waiver wire pick in fantasy football. So I just wanted to correlate, something we do every day with fantasy football and apply it to cards and see if we can come up with something. So I'll let you guys know in the future what I sell these for. Thinking about putting the Pollard and the Henderson on eBay to see what I can get for them. And if Dalvin Cook ever goes down and Madison's name becomes hot, I'm going to throw it out there too. And I'll let you guys know in the future what type of returns I get with those cards.
And real quick, what was that first one, that gold number 2?
It wasn't numbered. It was just Prism rookie. It was just gold.
Got it.
Yeah, the other 2 were numbered. That one wasn't.
I was gonna say, I don't know all the serial numbers on all the new products. I feel like they come up with 3 or 4 different refractors or prisms, and then you change up the different colors or numbering every single year. So unless you really, really follow those sets, it's different. And with tops in the past between football and baseball, they used to change the numbering too between sports.
Right. They've made so many parallels now that I feel like you have to get the jersey match for a collector or an investor. Mostly for the collector side, you want that jersey match just to show it off. It's something you can display. And like this Pollard with the white, it's got a refractor shine to it with the white. Nice. It's really cool. So yeah, I definitely, for the collector side, if I want a Cleveland Browns card, I know there's not any brown parallels out there, but I'm definitely looking for the orange to match it up with jerseys.
And I know we always talk about different episodes. That'd be kind of an interesting one to see how the jersey color matchup compares to different numberings, especially let's say under 100. Because once you start getting that 100 scarcity, it changes a little bit because those are the super rare cards. Everyone always wants a gold or a red or orange. At least in baseball wise, those are very low numbered. I don't know from the football side or basketball side, but I feel at least with those colors, people have been collecting them for years and always want those. But I kind of wonder where that tipping point is between the color match and also the scarcity of a card.
Well, yeah, that quote that I just read off, my hobby knowledge wants to tell me that the color match is going to be worth more. But I'm sure if we look into the data, it might just come down to which one's more rare. Just the numbering and the color match might not mean anything. So yeah, it's definitely something we could look to into in the future, and definitely be cool to come up with some numbers. So guys, stay tuned for some future episodes. We will be taking a look at parallels to see if color matches will make a difference. But for today, we are going to dive into two different sports. We have one sports that's very analytics driven, and you probably guessed it, it's baseball. And we have another sport that is not very analytics driven, but it could be. I feel like you can use numbers in anything. And I'm gonna be taking a look at the MMA and the statistics that are they're brand new and they're just coming out. But we're gonna look at the two different sports and how deep the analytics are right now. And Ryan, you can go ahead and dive into the baseball stats that you want to talk about and the intricacies of the pitching stats.
Absolutely. So I'm going to share my screen real quick and go over this spreadsheet. All right. So earlier today, I asked people on Twitter what was the best stat out of these four: ERA, WHIP, XFIP, or Sierra. And overwhelmingly, people were saying ERA because it's a traditional stat that people look at for a triple crown. And there's been an argument made for ERA, but over time, stats become more advanced. People figure out true outcomes. Like in baseball right now, we talk about the different outcomes from a batter standpoint, and we can start predicting what happens when certain pitchers go in. So today I'm taking a look at four different stats to kind of predict on how well a pitcher actually pitches during a game, and going over them from a very simplistic level to you're an analytical nerd like me and over evaluate things. So you don't need this last stat if you're a normal collector. Like, you can be fine looking at ERA, WHIP, or FIP. I'd prefer you look at FIP over ERA or WHIP. But if you really want to turn into the analytics, you start taking a look at Sierra. And good luck even like filling out this formula. Luckily, we have websites like Fangraphs that you can be lazy and just look up the numbers. But man, if you had to calculate all this by hand, good luck with that. So I wanted to go over the first stat, which is ERA. We know that as how many earned runs per 9 innings. Now, this is a good stat because you figure out how many runs someone gives up, at least on the surface level. But when you really dive deep into it, it's kind of flawed because there is luck involved with it. Let's say you only give up 3 hits in an entire game, which is great, right? If you have 3 hits across 9 innings, everyone is thrilled. You have a really, really low WHIP. You've done great. However, what happens if they were all in the same inning and you gave up 2 singles, and then guess what? You have like Stanton up there, boom, hits a line drive home run, and you just gave up 3 earned runs for that game. Ouch. Well, what happens in another game if you give up 3 hits, 2 of them are in different innings, and then someone in the last inning hits a home run? That is 1 earned run in 9 innings. So there is luck involved. And this is just at the very, very simplistic level. Sure, it can tell you how well a pitcher does across a game, but it's not perfect because you have different outcomes like that, which you can't really control. So the next thing we take a look at is a little bit more of an advanced stat, which is WHIP. Now, WHIP is walks, hits, and divided by the innings pitched. Now, already at the surface level, there is a flaw with this. It doesn't include hit by pitch. So if a pitcher really wants to improve their WHIP and wants to go into these meetings with their agents and say, hey, I don't know WHIP, just start beating batters instead of walking them on ball 4. Your WHIP's going to go down a lot lower. But the problem with WHIP is, like, again, there is some luck involved with it. There's different outcomes of hits. They're not all equal. Someone goes up and hits a home run, or someone hits a single. With the WHIP formula, it is equal across that because it just looks at the simplistic level of a hit. So now we have to go and dive deeper into the stat, because again, a single versus a home run should not be equal. So this is where FIP and XFIP come across. And out of the first 3 stats and out of internet watching, I'd recommend just taking a look at these stats, either FIP or XFIP. I'm going to talk about the differences between the two before diving deep into Sierra, because Sierra, man, if you're not into analytics, it's going to kind of mess with your mind. It's pretty complicated. So stay with the FIP level while you're still here. But FIP is pretty much the idea that a pitcher kind of controls the game. They can either strike out batters, they either walk them, they can also hit by pitch. Thank you. It fixes the whip issue. And you also take a look at home runs. Your defense is not involved at all. Now, the difference between a FIP and XFIP is XFIP takes a look at the league home run percentage on fly balls. So why I like XFIP better is baseballs change over and over again. The commissioner at baseball right now doesn't have a standard baseball. A lot of the pitchers always complain. A lot of batters complain because you don't know. 1 year as a batter, you either hit 30 home runs or you hit 45 home runs, and everyone goes absolutely crazy. And that's just because the commissioner tweaks the baseball a little bit, whether it's the seams, whether it's the surface of the baseball. He has ultimate control over it, or even the manufacturing process. And at the end of the day, there has to be some standardization between that. And XFIP allows that between different years to standardize it. So this is why I like XFIP a little bit better than FIP. The only problem with the difference now between XFIP and FIP is that there's pitchers that will have a lower fly ball percentage of a home run than there is of the average. So let's say, for example, across the league, 10% of fly balls are home runs. There's some pitchers that only might give up 8% or 7% or 9%, and they're going to become penalized on the XFIP level because of that. So again, not a perfect stat, but it is a lot better than WHIP or ERA. So the problem also with XFIP is you can't really go back too much, because 2002 was the first year that this stat was pretty much implemented. They just don't have enough data before 2002. So you can't really compare a pitcher like Bob Gibson's legendary year or Dwight Gooden's legendary year, which, as you guys see in my tabs right above here, I'm going to be kind of detailing their legendary years and taking a look at some of the deeper numbers behind them. So the last stat I really wanted to talk about is Sierra. Now, Sierra is kind of like your dream analytical stat. It takes a look at practically everything. It looks at the batted ball profile, whether it's a ground ball or if it's a fly ball. It also takes a look at different stadiums that you're in. So each ballpark has a different factor. Whether you're playing in Colorado, you're playing in Miami, each ballpark might favor a pitcher or a batter. And Sierra takes a look at both the ballpark factor and also takes a look at a lot more advanced stats like that. And what I really like also about Sierra is it helps specialty pitchers. There's pitchers that specialize in getting ground balls. Well, they're supported in Sierra. There's pitchers that specialize in giving up fly balls. They're given extra in this formula versus FIP and XFIP. You can't really determine that. So Sierra is a much, much more advanced stat. And I don't have the formula here on the screen, but you guys can look it up. And it's pretty complicated compared to FIP or WHIP or ERA. So again, calculating wise, go back to FIP, WHIP, ERA. Sierra is super, super complicated, but it's the most accurate stat out there. One other thing that I do like about FIP and Sierra is they're actually pretty close. So over here on the right, I want to show you this right now. I took a look at 7 different pitchers, some AL and NL pitchers, and kind of just wanted to break down their profile to kind of show you what FIP and Sierra kind of show you based around WAR as well. And I want to say too, people always talk about, oh, how is WAR calculated? WAR takes a look at FIP. It doesn't take a look at Sierra. It looks at FIP and not XFIP. Again, you can't calculate XFIP way in the past. Sierra is an absolute mess. So it just takes a look at that when going after that. And that's at least Fangraphs. I have to double check Baseball Reference because they have a different WAR formula. If you guys don't know, the two guys that are in charge, or two sites that are in charge of WAR, are Baseball Reference and Fangraphs. They have their own advanced calculations and people kind of analyze both of them. But I'm taking a look at Fangraphs WAR over here. So currently, everyone thinks Max Scherzer is going to win the Cy Young. People are like, he's dominating, and he has been ever since he's been traded over the Dodgers, crushing the competition. He's a great pitcher. He might win his 4th Cy Young. So he's at 2.18 ERA. Really, really good. Whip-wise, he has a 0.8. Again, really, really good. Anytime you have a sub 3 ERA, even close to 2, and a sub 1 whip, you're looking at elite levels. However, what I found was interesting was his XFIP and Sierra profiles were much higher. His xFIP actually being a 3.2 and his Sierra being a 2.82. Now, since he's been with the Dodgers, I don't believe he's given up many earned runs. I think at the time it was either 1 or 3. Don't quote me on that, but he's done extremely, extremely well. So there's going to be some regression, but the thing is the season's ending really, really soon. So he might skate by, but these stats right here show me that these numbers are a little bit lower. He is getting a little bit lucky, but still 2.18, 0.81, really good. Corbin Burns, on the other hand, take a look at this. He has a 2.34 ERA and 0.94. So on the surface level, you think, okay, Scherzer's been doing a lot better. But then you take a look at FIP in Sierra. He has a 2.31 xFIP compared to a 2.6 Sierra. And you take a look at the WAR stat, which everyone doesn't understand how WAR is calculated. Take a look at the WAR. So based off of Fangraphs WAR, Corbin Burns has a 7.2 compared to Max Scherzer's 5.5. Take a look at Walker Bueller. So another great player, and I like Walker Bueller. I have a lot of his cards. So his ERA is a 2.58. Unfortunately, he's done bad his last 2 starts. His whip, 0.98. Great stats on the surface level. But take a look at his xFIP in Sierra, 3.64 and 3.79. These 2 stats don't show the entire story. And then you look at Jacob Degrom. Unfortunately, he got hurt, but he was having a historic season by all accounts. 1.08 ERA, 0.55 whip. Does FIP in Sierra follow that profile? Well, yeah, it does, because he has a 1.6 FIP and a 1.74 Sierra. Take a look at that compared to Scherzer, who's going to win the Cy Young this year, or even Corbin Burns. Huge difference. I mean, we're almost talking about a 1 difference right now between Degrom and Burns or Scherzer. And it's really a shame Degrom got hurt. AL-wise, I mean, Garrett Cole has a 3 ERA, 1 whip. FIP and Sierra fit his profile really great, 2.87 and 2.86. Robbie Ray, 2.72, 1.04. Take a look at FIP and Sierra, 3.1, 3.08. But what I found really interesting was Lance Lynn, because his ERA and whip versus his FIP and Sierra were way off. So you take a look at his ERA as a 2.47, 1.04. You'd expect maybe a FIP around like a 2.6 to 2.8 range. But his FIP, xFIP, I should say, is a 3.8 and a 3.72. So Lance Lynn has been extremely lucky this year based off of the advanced stats of FIP and Sierra. One last point to briefly talk about with FIP and Sierra. These, again, are supposed to be compared to your ERA. That's how the formulas were built out of it. And I took a look also at Baseball Reference to take a look at the top 50 players all time for between FIP and ERA. They have their own filters on there. Personally, I would have filtered it by more innings pitched, but I just took a look at what they currently had, and 31 players were both on the top 50 for FIP and ERA. If you want to take a look at some historic seasons, like Bob Gibson. So his 1968 year, people go crazy over because of his 1.1 ERA, and people say they moved around because of him. I believe that's true. Again, they'll have to double check, but his FIP for that year was 1.77. Still really, really good. But compared to that 1.1 ERA, again, no xFIP, unfortunately. If you look at Sierra as well, not even on here. Dwight Gooden, take a look at his FIP over here. So everyone talks about his 1985 campaign being one of the best years ever. He had a 2.13 FIP. Again, really good. But what I found really interesting is his actual rookie year, 1984, he had a 1.69 FIP. That was technically a better year. He just got unlucky with the ERA. And you can look at the WAR as well. Very, very comparable. But the big thing about taking a look at these advanced stats is they pretty much go back and support the ERA and whip. If you see a big discrepancy between the two, you can kind of expect a regression later down the season, or a pitcher's been kind of lucky. If it's the opposite in the case, right, the pitcher hasn't been lucky and you can expect them to pitch better down the line. You can kind of use these stats for predicting future value, but again, with things like xFIP, it takes a look at the batted baseball profile across the league, and that does fluctuate year to year, so it is not a perfect stat from that perspective. But you guys can see how well developed these are just for the pitchers themselves. In future episode, I'm going to be deep diving into batters and taking a look at some other stats as well. But personally, Sierra and FIP, you can't go wrong with this.
So I have to ask you, what do you think about the perfect stat of wins?
Yeah, so wins I would not use. And again, it goes back to luck. You could be playing for the New York Yankees, or you could be playing for an awful, awful team. Like, unfortunately, right now, I'm sorry, Orioles fans, but your team looks really, really bad this year. You guys have some prospects coming up, but currently not looking good. So if you have a great pitcher playing for the Yankees historically, you're going to get a lot of wins. If you have someone playing for the Orioles, you're not. And I should change the Yankees to the Rays because I'm a Rays fan. Rays are crushing the Yankees this year, but I'm just looking from a historic perspective. Yankees have done extremely well.
And for the average viewer, because I questioned for half a second, FIP, you want FIP to be lower, right? Because I
Yeah,
was looking at it and I was like, oh, it's high, and comparing it to the other number. But then you said near the end that FIP was calculated to be kind of like ERA.
correct. Yeah, and the most interesting thing about FIP and ERA, you can take a look at the top 50 over here. Again, a lot of them match. So one thing I found interesting, like taking a look at an example of a player, Ed Walsh. Ed Walsh played in the early 1900s, and he leads both in ERA and FIP. So you can take an example right over here. His ERA for a career was 1.8. His FIP was 2.02. So these stats pretty close. I mean, obviously a zero point 0.2 difference, but if you take a look at the grand scheme of things, that's not too far off. And look at his wins, only 195. People in the past would be like, oh my God, only 195 wins. This pitcher sucks. Don't buy his card. But if you take a look at the advanced stats, he leads in both ERA, not advanced, but for the point, he leads in FIP. And also, if you take a look at WHIP, he has a 1 WHIP, which is really low as well. Great pitcher, just didn't get much recognition because of the era he played in, where everyone focused on the win. Of course, like Cy Young because of that.
All right, so take all those stats that Ryan just talked about, and imagine a world where baseball, where all you calculated was hits and walks and home runs and maybe strikeouts. Well, that's the MMA world right now that we're in with analytics. This Fightnomics book that I'm diving into, it was written back in 2012 ish, and before that, everything they knew about fighting was just what they would learn from their coaches and what they knew from the past. You know, throw jab to set up the right, like the guy who throws the most jabs or wears the other guy out wins. Like there wasn't any analytics to back it up, and they weren't even really looking for it or trying to figure out their opponents, looking at like, hey, maybe if I look at this guy's fight and how he lost, if he takes 5 body shots, he starts to lower his hands and he becomes more susceptible to hits to the face. They weren't looking at stuff like that, but now they are. Now they're looking at the film and the analytics and trying to figure out the weaknesses of their opponents and the strengths of their opponents. So recently, the UFC has been gathering stats for striking and ground time with grappling. There's also defensive stats, which one guy, Kamaru Usman, has never been taken down. It was a 100% defense rate. Which is just insane. And yeah, he's a champion. So just some cool stats that I've been learning from this book. And as I learn and I talk about the MMA, I'm going to be, sharing with you guys. 100% of fights start out on your feet. So 100% of fights start out in a striking position, and 72% of fights end with the winner being the one who threw the most strikes. So the better striker wins 72% of the time, and that says a lot looking at these stats. So I wanted to find just one stat that we could look into that the UFC is putting out there. And we don't have anything where we're adding walks and hits given up and coming up. They're not doing that yet. So we can come up with statistics like that, where we can build a fighter's offensive stats, taking their striking along with their takedown and their ground time and grappling percentage and stuff like that, and we can build statistics, and that's our goal with the channel. This book I've been reading, Fightnomics, it says that 36% of fights end with knockout or technical knockout or stoppage. So that's normally from striking. 24% end in submission and 39% end in decisions. 1% with no winners. That's normally when you have an eye poke and the guy can't continue, or a guy gets hit in the crotch and he can't continue. That you have no winners there. And now that we know that 72% win from throwing the most strikes, we should pay attention to who's throwing the most punches and kicks and strikes, significant strikes. The UFC is tracking significant strikes. And Dana White once said that you could have four corners. You could have a basketball game in one corner, a baseball game in another corner, soccer game in one corner, and then a fight breaks out in the fourth one. Where's everyone going to go? They're going to go watch the fight. So UFC and MMA is actually becoming the most popular growing sport there is in the entire world. And now that Panini is starting to come out with some UFC cards, they just came out with the first Prism and the first Select, and they have rookie shields. There are rookie cards that you can get into and start investing in younger players. I do watch a lot of UFC every single Saturday, and the really, really young guys, they don't have cards yet. So if there is a rookie card of someone, that they are succeeding, they are doing very well. But with the UFC, they have statistics that they're throwing out there, and one of them that stuck out to me was significant strikes per minute. They also have takedowns per minute, and takedown attempts per minute, and you have other submission type stuff. But with the significant strikes being so important to the winner in the outcome, and with us investing in cards, you really want that fighter to win. They can't really take a loss or the value. You're pretty much betting on their next fight when you buy their card. So looking at the significant strikes per minute, I wanted to look at some of the greats, and I picked a random fighter to see kind of what the statistic looks like and what we should be looking for if we wanted to invest into a fighter. So one of them was Amanda Nunes, who is the top pound for pound women's fighter. She's 21-4 in the UFC. The UFC hasn't been recording these fights for very long. She has 17 fights that have been recorded. Her significant strikes per minute is 4.5. So right now it's just a number to me, and it's just a number to us. So 4.5, like, is that high? Is that low? Well, we'll take a look at some other fighters to find out if that's average. So for her 17 fights that have been recorded, she is 15-0 when she has outstruck her opponent, and she's 0-2 when she was outstruck. So out of those 17 fights, every single time she threw more significant strikes than the other fighter, she won. And every single time the other fighter threw more than her, she lost. And this is the best women's fighter there is, who's only lost 4 fights. So let's take a look at, one of the people who call him the GOAT is Habib. So with Habib, he's 29-0 in the UFC. They only had 13 of his fights recorded. That's how new we are in this data gathering. And it's crazy to me that they're just getting into this. But he was only outstruck in 2 of those fights. He's known as more of a submission fighter, so people wouldn't really think of him throwing more strikes. But he's 29-0, undefeated, only outstruck twice, and that was only by 3 strikes in both of those fights, and he won those. So all the other fights he threw more significant strikes, and his significant strikes per minute was 4.1, which is just 0.4 less than Nunes was. So I picked a random fighter. I just clicked on a random name just to see kind of what their statistics look like. And I clicked on Valerie Letourneau, and she is 8-6. Her significant strikes per minute is 4.51. So we have a random fighter with close to the same amount of significant strikes per minute as the two greats. 6 fights of hers have been recorded. 3 of them, she threw the most strikes. She won. The other 3, she didn't throw the most strikes. She lost. So we're finding a trend. I don't really know if we can gather much with the 4.5, but we can learn from looking at the statistics that if you want to invest in a fighter, you want someone who's aggressive and not going to stand there. Well, you're going to say, well, what about heavyweight champ Francis Nuganu? Now, this is where I think we need analytical minds to break this down, because heavyweight fighters fight a lot different than lightweight fighters or strawweight fighters, because heavyweight fighters have the power to just knock someone out in one punch. So you have Francis Ngannou with his significant strikes per minute, 2.54. He had 13 fights recorded. Most of these fights, he threw less than 10 punches. He just stood there, stayed his distance, and he's just so strong. He just waited for that one punch. Some of the fights was just one punch thrown. Like, he walked out there, just knocked the guy out, walked away, and he was a champion. So I feel like we can take these analytics that the UFC has given us, and we need to break it down per weight class, because the fighting styles are different. And now someone who may watch UFC a lot might be saying, well, what about the interim champion, Cyril Gane, who's a rookie? You can get his rookie card. He's 10-0, and I love this guy. He's a heavyweight, but he fights like a middleweight. His significant strikes per minute is 5.37. So it's
crazy.
He just goes out there and he throws tons of punches. He's 10-0. 7 fights have been recorded. He always outstrikes his opponents. I'm pretty sure he's getting set up to fight against Ngannou, which is going to be interesting. If my theory is correct, I would go with Gane, who's going to be throwing more punches than Francis Ngannou is. But that's going to be a great fight to watch. So what we can learn from this is, with the UFC being so new, we can take these statistics and try to build our own stats, take significant strikes, add on takedown strikes per minute, or we can take this and put it into 5-minute rounds and build out stats per round and weight class. So there's so many possibilities we have with MMA and the UFC, and it's not anywhere near baseball, but we can try to get there and make sense of it. So there will be future episodes where we try to make sense of it, or I'll try to make sense of it and apply it to fighting and also cards. And hopefully we can scout these fighters and better predict and outcomes in the future. Because, it doesn't even, maybe you don't even care about cards and you're just watching this because you saw UFC in the title and you just want to bet on the next fight. We can also apply it to that too and try to predict a future winner, and not just based off what Las Vegas is putting with the odds, but use these analytics and build out our own stats. So many opportunities. I'm actually getting really excited just thinking about it, and I can't do anything about it right this second. I want to start just putting it together and just not go to sleep. But that's what you guys should be looking out in the future. And it's just crazy to me. I do have some Cyril Gane rookie cards. I want to be transparent. I did do some breaks and with the heavyweight class, just looking out for his rookie card, because I think he's going to be great. So just want to be transparent. I do have his cards. But yeah, that's the UFC. What do you think about that, Ryan?
Well, I think it's really interesting. It's definitely on the infancy side of stuff. And like, personally, just even looking at like a sports fan, I'd just be interested to run all the different numbers on it and build out the formulas like the Sierra or the FIP, or eventually build out some type of war where you can kind of compare different fighters across maybe different weight classes or different eras. I know UFC, again, still pretty young, but I mean, there's a lot of champions already.
Right. And I want to look at things like I've done boxing in the past. I've done jujitsu and Muay Thai. You learn a lot of different combinations. I would want to learn like which combinations are more successful than others. And that would take a lot of film and a lot of study. But right now I'm just taking what we're given, and there's still a lot of possibilities with what we're given. But yeah, in the future, if we do come up with some cool numbers, we could apply it and see what comes of it.
I know one thing too. It's not just UFC. I mean, I feel like besides baseball, all the major sports out there are pretty underdeveloped with Moneyball. I'm not sure why, because it's kind of revolutionized the baseball game, at least on the outcome approach and how teams are now using analytics to make out better trades, to figure out what players actually to get in the offseason to save money. But that approach really hasn't moved on so much into other sports yet. I can definitely see it happening, but I don't know why it hasn't.
Actually, I might have said this in a previous episode. I'm not sure, but Paul DePodesta, who was the head of Moneyball for the Oakland A's, he was hired by the Cleveland Browns, and people were like, "Oh, this is dumb." He knows how to get cheap players for a baseball team, not for a football team. But they hired him to lead the analytics department, and they got a coach named Freddie Kitchens, because they didn't want to listen to DePodesta. They wanted to go with the football minds, the GM with the football mind. They hired Freddie Kitchens. The Browns were terrible, but Paul DePodesta was pushing for a coach named Kevin Stefanski, who was analytics based. So they didn't hire him that year. Freddie Kitchens sucked. They fired him. So they went ahead and hired Kevin Stefanski the next year, and he wins coach of the year. Browns win their first playoff game in 30 years, and they're starting to use the analytics. And I see other football teams doing it. I know John Harbaugh with the Baltimore Ravens will, like a 4th and 1, the analytics say go for it in a certain field position. You have stuff like that. But as far as team building goes, I don't know how much they're using with
Because
analytics.
you have so many different positions in football compared to baseball as well. So that definitely complicates things.
Right. But so, yeah, you have play calling where you can use analytics, team building. I feel like we're in football, we're at a position where you have so many guys who do things the old school way, and you have guys that do things the new school way, and they're kind of clashing right now. And sometimes analytics wins, sometimes the old school mind wins, and it all goes back to that saying that I quoted earlier, and like the player with the hot streak who's historically 25% shooter. You don't want him shooting the game-winning shot. You want to give it to your best player who shoots 50%, even though he hasn't made a shot all day. But the traditional minds will say, give it to the hot guy. But yeah, there's just things where we need to figure out in all sports and try to help all sports grow. And this is Moneyball Cards, so we'll try to apply it to cards as well. All right, guys. So that was episode 6 of Moneyball Cards. Leave a comment about any statistics that you like to look at for any sport, and we'll dive into that into the future. This is Moneyball Cards. I'm Jordan,
And I'm Ryan.
and we'll catch you guys next time.